Assembling his team, Presumptive President-elect Joe Biden introduces his new national security advisors. Off the committee, Senator Dianne Feinstein is stepping down as the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee. Fighting the closures, more dioceses are pushing back against another round of church restrictions. And fight for the unborn. New developments in the case of pro-lifers who were arrested after leaving a chalk message in the nation's capital. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, November 24th, 2020. Good evening and thank you for joining us. I'm Eric Rosales in for Tracy Sable. Presumptive President-elect Joe Biden introduces his national security team. They're preparing to take office January 20th, and President Trump is no longer standing in the way. He gave the green light for his administration to work with Biden's team this evening.
It's a team that will keep our country and our people safe and secure.
New momentum for Joe Biden, fueled by President Donald Trump directing his administration to begin working with the transition team for the first time. The decision paves the way for a peaceful transfer of power and allows the FBI to begin background checks for Joe Biden's newly introduced national security team.
It's a team that reflects the fact that America is back, ready to lead the world, not retreat from it. Once again, sit at the head of the table, ready to confront our adversaries and not reject our allies.
The presumptive president-elect's new team is praised by Democrats who are looking for a change from the last 4 years.
We had a president to come in and just undercut all of that and started out taking this country on a different road, a road which has lost respect around the world. These people, I think, will get that respect back.
But Republicans like Senator Marco Rubio are not impressed. He tweeted, quote, Biden's cabinet picks went to Ivy League schools, had strong resumes, attend all the right conferences, and will be polite and orderly caretakers of America's decline. I support American greatness, and I have no interest in returning to the normal that left us dependent on China, and according to others, enabled Iran.
I think it's a fair criticism of the Obama administration foreign policy that its greatest achievement was the empowerment of Iran across the greater Middle East.
Still, presumptive President-elect Joe Biden says he wants to, quote, build back better.
Let's begin that work to heal and unite America as well as the world.
Even as President Donald Trump begins the transition process, he is refusing to concede the election, tweeting, quote, we will never concede to fake ballots. Our case strongly continues. We will keep up the good fight, and I believe we will prevail. The election drama comes as news of a vaccine over the last week has been a boom to Wall Street. And at the White House earlier today, President Trump announced a new all-time record.
The stock market Dow Jones Industrial Average just hit 30,000, which is the highest in history. We've never broken 30,000, and that's just despite everything that's taken place with the pandemic. I'm very thrilled with what's happened on the vaccine front.
The president appeared in the briefing room for about a minute and left without taking any questions. Well, tonight, California Senator Dianne Feinstein is stepping down from her role as the top Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee. The announcement comes following public criticism for her bipartisan outreach and after the confirmation hearings of Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett.
Can you explain to us today how you would disagree or agree with Justice Scalia's view of severability?
Last month's confirmation hearing for Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett wasn't the first time Senator Dianne Feinstein quizzed this nominee.
The dogma lives loudly within you, and that's of concern.
In 2017, Senator Feinstein faced criticism from Republicans for questioning Amy Coney Barrett's Catholic beliefs. But at last month's hearing, it was Senator Feinstein's own party and Democratic supporters doing the criticizing.
So why is Senator Feinstein taking options off the table?
Demand Justice, a group that opposes conservative judicial nominees, wrote on October 15th, quote, It's time for Senator Feinstein to step down from her leadership position on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and they were one voice of many echoing that same call. First elected in 1992, Senator Dianne Feinstein has embraced bipartisanship, as seen at the end of last month's hearing when she hugged the current chairman, Senator Lindsey Graham. He says Senator Dianne Feinstein got in the way of Democrats' plan to expand the number of Supreme Court justices.
And as to my good friend, Senator Feinstein, what happened to her by showing an act of human kindness tells you all you need to know about what awaits a senator who gets in the way of the agenda they have for our nation.
The Senate's number 2 Democrat, Dick Durbin, says that he will seek to take Senator Feinstein's top spot on that committee. Police continue their clashes with pro-abortion protesters in Poland, that is. A group of demonstrators scuffled with police in front of the education ministry, and other protesters blocked traffic in Warsaw last night. The so-called women's strike movement has been protesting since a top court in Poland effectively banned all abortions last month. In France, the Interior Minister is ordering an investigation after police were caught on video forcing migrants to leave an encampment. Officers can be seen pulling tents away from refugees and lifting tents with people still inside. Now, police were evacuating a temporary camp in Paris. Aid groups say that they're trying to find housing for hundreds of migrants. Pope Francis advances the sainthood causes of several men and women, including 2 Italian priests from the 20th century. Venerable Father Mario Cesari was ordained at 23. He died in an accident roughly 2 decades later. And servant of God, Father Alfonso Ugolini, was ordained at the age of 65. He spent his life serving the disadvantaged. Well, China criticizes Pope Francis over a comment in his new book mentioning Uyghur Muslim minority group. Now, the Pope, in the book, Pope Francis listed the Uyghurs as a group persecuted for their faith. Now, today, a spokesperson for Chinese government ministry said that the remarks were not true. The Beijing official also says ethnic minorities have always been protected. However, Chinese officials made no mention of the detention camps where it's believed more than 1 million members of the Muslim minority groups are being held. Joining us now is EWTN News Rome correspondent Colm Flynn with more about this new book. Colm, what else did Pope Francis say about the minorities?
Good evening, Eric. Well, Pope Francis in this new book, which was written by British journalist Austin Ivory, talks about the need for us to see the world from the perspective of those on the peripheries and the margins of societies. He talks about persecuted Christians and other religious groups, not just in China, but in other parts of the world, like the Rohingyas and the Yazidis.
And remind us all about the relationship between the Vatican and China.
Well, Eric, last month the Vatican renewed an agreement with Beijing on the appointment of Catholic bishops. Now, this agreement has been quite controversial since it was first put into effect in 2018. For example, the Trump administration, as well as human rights groups, have all spoken out against the deal. Now, China and the Vatican have had no formal relations since the Communist Party cut ties and arrested Catholic clerics soon after the seizing of power in 1949.
And calling back to the new book, what else did it mention in it?
Eric, there's a lot covered in this book, which is entitled Let Us Dream, The Path to a Better Future. The content was taken from many exchanges between the author and the Holy Father during the summer lockdown here in Italy. Now, the book expresses the Pope's support for the demand for racial justice in the wake of the George Floyd killing. But on the other hand, he also criticized the tearing down of historic statues as what he calls a misguided way to purify the past. A better way, he said, is to debate the past through dialogue.
And Pope Francis also shares some of his past experiences in the book and relates them to the COVID-19 pandemic, correct?
That's right. The first was when he was only 21 years of age and he suffered from a lung infection, which was very serious. This was during his second time in the seminary in Buenos Aires, and he says that this experience changed how he saw life and gave him a good idea of how people with COVID-19 feel as they struggle to breathe on ventilators. He says in the book that he remembers hugging his mother and saying, "Just tell me if I'm going to die." And the second solitude moment was when he lived in Germany in 1986. And Pope Francis said that he felt like he didn't belong, and this threw him off balance. He spoke about watching planes landing at Frankfurt Airport, longing for his home country of Argentina. And he said he especially felt homesick when Argentina won the World Cup, and he wasn't there to celebrate. The Pope goes on to talk about the third COVID experience in his life, this experience of solitude, which was between 1990 and 1992, when he spent a year and 10 months living in a Jesuit's residence in Argentina. Now, during this time, he said Mass, he heard confessions, but he didn't leave the house that much, calling it a sort of self-imposed lockdown. He said he used this time to pray a lot and develop new ideas.
Colm Flynn, thank you so much for joining us. EWTN News Rome correspondent. Thanks again.
Thank you, Eric.
Coming up, new developments in the annual pilgrimage to Guadalupe, Mexico, scheduled for next month. And an update on another round of coronavirus restrictions and their effect on Catholic churches. Welcome back. Well, two pro-life groups are suing the District of Columbia, alleging the city discriminated against their pro-life viewpoints by refusing to grant permission to paint or chalk messages on the street while allowing other groups to do so. The lawsuit, filed on behalf of the Frederick Douglass Foundation and Students for Life of America, follows the arrest this summer of two protesters outside a Washington, D.C. Planned Parenthood clinic who were using chalk to write a message, "Black Preborn Lives Matter." Reverend Dean Nelson, Executive Director of Human Coalition Action and Chairman of the Frederick Douglass Foundation, joins me now on Skype to talk more about this lawsuit. Reverend Nelson, welcome back. It's good to see you, sir.
It's great to be here, and thank you so much for giving attention to this important issue.
Most definitely. Now, why was it important for you to move forward on this kind of legal action?
You know, it's important because the American people need to know that viewpoint discrimination happens too frequently in our country, and the mayor in Washington, D.C. clearly violated the rights of the students and our members, and that's something that is an injustice, and it needs to be remedied within our culture.
If we can, let's talk for a moment about the August arrest. From what I understand, everyone was told that you would not be stopped from writing these messages in support of Black preborn lives as long as you use paint that would quickly wash away, but that wasn't the case, right?
That was the case that we intended, and when we got there early that morning, we were met with police officers that ultimately told us that if those who were members of our group were to simply write in chalk on the sidewalk, which was something that they have routinely done, if in fact they did that, they would be arrested. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. And we felt like that was a complete injustice, particularly in comparison to many of the events that had taken place in Washington, D.C. earlier this summer with Black Lives Matter events, where they were actually painting with permanent paint in the streets. And so we felt like that this was a contradiction and needed to be called out.
Most definitely. I mean, as you mentioned, there are others that have been able to paint their messages that have been allowed to stay in place, and some might consider this a double standard.
There's no question it's a double standard. And we feel like that while the government can say that one speech is okay and another speech is not okay, that's not the standard that we have in America. It should be free speech for all. And we feel like that this was a gross injustice, and we're going to fight as strongly as we can against the D.C. mayor and the government that stood against us.
Let's talk about the abortion issue and what role has abortion played in the loss of life in the Black community in particular?
You know, for way too long, we have not heard enough people emphasizing the disproportionate impact of abortion and what it has had in the African American community. Some of your viewers might know, but many still don't know, that more abortions are performed on Black women disproportionately. 36% of all abortions are performed on African American women, yet they still only make up 13% of the population in the United States. In some cities, like in New York City, there are more Black children that are aborted than born alive. And so we will continue at Human Coalition Action, the Frederick Douglass Foundation, to emphasize some of these disproportionate stats, because we really want to see all Black lives matter. We want to see every Black life matter. And I feel like that until we really address this issue sufficiently in our community, we are seeing just these disproportionate numbers that need to be addressed.
Now, what's next? Has there been any response at all to your lawsuit?
We have not yet received any response from the mayor's office, but we will continue with our strategy to highlight the disproportionate numbers of abortions, particularly in urban communities. Since this incident occurred in August, we have done other cities like Baltimore, where we were happy to say that we were met in a much more positive manner by the police. And we'll continue our fight with Students for Life in cities across America to make our voices known and to stand up for preborn children all across America.
Reverend Dean Nelson, Executive Director of Human Coalition Action and Chairman of the Frederick Douglass Foundation, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
God bless you. Well, Catholics in France continue to protest against the closing of churches following another round of coronavirus restrictions. Some 700 members of the faithful prayed at the center of Nantes on Sunday. It's in western France, where churches are closed because of coronavirus restrictions. People in France continue to pray in the streets and call for houses of worship to reopen. In Mexico, the Catholic Church is canceling the pilgrimage to Guadalupe because of the pandemic. It is considered the biggest Catholic pilgrimage in the world. But the Mexico Bishops' Conference says that the basilica will be closed from December 11th to the 13th. Around 15 million Catholics from Mexico and around the globe make the pilgrimage to the Virgin of Guadalupe every year. With a surge of COVID-19 cases across the nation, we're seeing new restrictions on houses of worship. In some parts of the country, Catholic Church officials are speaking out, and they say that they can worship while still following the safety guidelines. Correspondent Mark Irons gives us an update.
As coronavirus numbers increase, public officials are rolling out new guidelines regarding houses of worship. In the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser is announcing adjustments to Phase 2 openings.
We are reducing the maximum capacity inside our houses of worship from 100 people to 50 people.
That goes into effect tomorrow. In Oregon, new restrictions announced last week, with Governor Kate Brown now limiting faith gatherings to 25 people. The move prompting backlash from church leaders, with the Archbishop of Portland, Alexander Sample, insisting in a statement that churches have been following safety protocols and the virus isn't spreading at faith gatherings. Why are we limited to 25 people in a church that can seat 1,000 while certain businesses are allowed to operate on a percentage of capacity? I would like to know the governor's rationale for tighter restrictions on churches. It is not data-driven. It does not make sense. This as Governor Andy Beshear orders new COVID restrictions in Kentucky.
COVID-19 is stripping us of people we love in our Kentucky communities.
He's recommending a halt to in-person worship. Louisville Archbishop Joseph Kurtz spoke to me about that.
He made it a recommendation. We still take it very seriously, but in dialogue, we've communicated that we will continue to provide safely public worship, in our case, the Holy Eucharist.
The Archbishop tells me the relationship between church and civil authorities is crucial in securing public safety during the pandemic. He also stressed the importance of the Eucharist to Catholics.
The Eucharist would certainly be top on the line in terms of what is essential in not only our faith, but in living a robust life.
In Washington, Mark Irons, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, an annual Thanksgiving tradition at the nation's capital. Bishop Michael Burbidge of the Diocese of Arlington is calling on Catholics to support adoptive families while recognizing the important work of faith-based organization agencies and during this National Adoption Month. In a statement, Bishop Burbidge writes in part, quote, "Adoption has deep roots in our Catholic faith and is evident in Scripture, sacred Scripture, as St. Joseph was loving foster father of our Lord." Now, joining me now on Skype to talk more about the National Adoption Month is Meaghan Lane, Program Director of Pregnancy and Adoption Support with Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Arlington. Meaghan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How long has Catholic Charities been serving children and families through the adoption process?
So in the Diocese of Arlington, it's actually our first ministry was adoption, and we have been licensed by the state of Virginia since 1947.
Wonderful. Now, you've described yourself or your particular role as a, quote, mission of service. Let's talk more about that and the role of the value of adoption, especially faith-based adoption, in supporting families, correct?
Absolutely. Every program is different, and every Catholic Charities would be different too in how they structure their adoption services. In the Diocese of Arlington, we certainly try to take a holistic approach to how we serve families through our adoption work. And really that starts at going back to the beginning, because in order for adoption to occur, there first has to be some kind of crisis or trauma. And so we want to make sure that we're meeting people in their moment of need. And that means providing pregnancy support for women so that they have the ability to even consider what their options might be. Someone in a crisis pregnancy, it's going to be difficult for them to even consider adoption as an option if they're not first stable and in a place that they can really think through what their options are. So we really take a strong approach on stabilizing families in crisis. We also, in our adoption work, we take a strong approach on preparing our families who will be adopting to be able to be very adoption informed so that they can really help to parent their child in a way that will help to promote healthy development and attachment in their adoption. We do this through multiple different types of adoption, including infant and foster care.
Now, how many children have you been able to place there in the Diocese of Arlington?
Well, I pulled some statistics, and in the past 3 years, with our infant program, we have placed 15 infants for adoption, and with our foster care program, we have placed 15 children in foster care. And those children from our foster care program, they could be children residing in Virginia, or they could be children who are in foster care in other states who are placed with one of our families here in Virginia.
And are folks at home who are interested? I mean, there's still a number of children that still need placement, correct?
Absolutely, especially with our foster care program. Our program is structured so that the families that are working with us, they're not necessarily interested in navigating the foster care system. They're really motivated to adopt a child who's available for adoption today. And that includes about 122,000 children nationally are available for adoption.
Wow. Well, Meaghan Lane, Program Director, Pregnancy and Adoption Support with Catholic Charities of the Diocese of Arlington, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Finally, tonight, the annual Thanksgiving tradition of the pardoning of 2 turkeys at the White House.
Corn, I hereby grant you a full pardon.
President Trump did the honors at the White House ceremony. Besides Corn, and an alternate named Cobb was standing by, and both are now headed to a new home at Iowa State University. Good for them. I want to thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Eric Rosales. Have a good night, and God bless.